I'll just give you like a tiny bit of background on the class for everybody. So we'll definitely welcome. We're so excited you're here. This is the very first week of the course, and this is the fourth run of the course. So people are learning range of backgrounds. We have analytics engineers, we have people from BI, data analysts, we have traditional engineers, we have product managers, a host of different backgrounds, but everyone is really excited to just pour into 1 month of a course. And the first week is really setting up your DBT project. You're setting up your initial sources and staging models. We are using Snowflake for our database, and we have a visualization layer with Sigma, who's Jake Hannon's one of our course co-instructors with Emily. So everyone's getting set up, and we have people from, like I said, from around the world. We have Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Australia, a bunch of European countries, Canada, US, so all over, which is really fun. It's a really great group, and we're super happy to have you. I'm sure Emily will drive from here, but yeah, thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the background. But yeah, we're really excited that you're joining us for our first week. So yeah, in the past courses, we've had different people come in for fireside chats, and yeah, we've gotten really great feedback of just people really love hearing about everyone's different backgrounds, how they got into data, what they're working on, advice they have, all that good stuff we'll get into. But yeah, I think everyone knows me, so I won't intro myself again to the class, but if you want to start out with just giving us like quick little background on who you are, where you're coming from, what you're doing, and then we can dive into some more questions. And then also, just as a reminder for everyone watching, feel free to use the chat, post questions. We'll try to work those in throughout the chat. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Grace.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm also super pumped to be here. I think this is like such a cool course and such a cool thing that you guys are doing. But yeah, a bit of my background is I started out in consulting originally, which kind of makes sense because it's somewhat of what I'm still doing now. But I started out at a typical consulting firm, specifically for like tech consulting. And during COVID, when you're between consulting projects, you're like on something called the bench. So you have like lots of extra free time. And during that time, I'd always had like interest in data. I'd done some stuff with like R in college and more like statistics. But during that, like I had a 2-month period on the bench, and I took a course, a self-developed curriculum about all things related to modern data stack. One of those things being DBT, Snowflake, some BI tools as well, and just absolutely fell in love with it. Came back from that being like, I want to be on data projects because there was a data practice within the consulting firm that I was at. So I got set up starting to work on different types of data projects with different clients. So going in and helping them get set up with migrating from old legacy systems to like Snowflake, DBT, all that kind of thing. And I also just fell in love with DBT, the magic of working with it. I've been told that I'm a little bit spoiled because I never had to work in the old horrid legacy system. Most of my experience is actually using modern data tooling, which is really great. And yeah, when I saw there was an offer at DBT or an open position, I knew I wanted to apply there and kind of get more behind the scenes, see how the sauce was made, and applied. Was excited to be accepted. And I've been at DBT since last October, so almost a year now. And at DBT, I'm an analytics engineer on the professional services team, which is still like a consulting arm of DBT. So I do a lot of work with a huge variety of clients, which is really fun for me because I got to see a lot of different types of setups, a lot of different problems people are dealing with, and help them solve problems, help them get trained in DBT, and get to work on a lot of individual projects as well. So get to help write articles. We worked on like creating a whole pack this past year, which was super fun. And then personally, I am also involved with a lot of theater stuff. There's like a huge crossover for me for data and storytelling, which I feel like is true of a lot of people that work at DBT. But yeah, the joke is that Coalesce, which is our big data conference in 2 weeks, I'm doing a talk at. And the same week, I'm also performing in a play in New York. So there's a lot going on. But yeah, I think data can do a lot for storytelling, which is part of my draw to it.
That's awesome. Me and Jake will be there at Coalesce. So
yay, I'll see you.
Yeah, that's super awesome. When you're coming into sort of the data field from consulting, what were the main skills you had to build up to start using like DBT and Snowflake and all these modern tools? Did you already know SQL? What sort of things did you have to figure out?
Yeah, I did not know SQL. I did not know Jinja. I did not know much of anything. I knew R, I knew a little bit of Python from just like coding classes, because at undergrad I studied like industrial engineering, which is, so I'd taken some engineering courses, but definitely didn't know anything about SQL. So that was the first step, was feeling confident in the languages and understanding how to write the thing that in my brain I wanted to do. And then I think from there, it was just exposure to a lot of different problems and a lot of different thinking about solutions for things. And I had a really great manager at my previous company who was really good about giving me enough freedom to be like, okay, here's the problem we're facing with. How do you think you can solve this? And then letting me think about solutions, brainstorming, and then coming back to him and saying, okay, I think I could write a model that would do this, or a macro in DBT that could accomplish this. And he would give me feedback on that. And so I think it was helpful for me to get exposure to lots of different types of problems once I built up that initial language, initial kind of ability to communicate in the data world. And then yeah, after that, just a lot of exposure, a lot of time spent failing. I remember very distinctly there was a time when my manager was like out for paternity leave, and I was just like, oh boy, this is going to take me like so much longer than it would take him to write this piece of code. But nailing down and figuring out how to do it, even taking that so much time to do that, was really helpful for the learning experience.
Yeah, it's really, I feel like it's always fun to hear like other people's mistakes and like how they learn from them. I don't know, a time someone like brought down production or something and had to figure out their way out of it. Those are always like the best lessons to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I on so many of my client projects now, like day one, I am like, we're setting up branch protection rules and we're setting up a CI job, because I did not have kind of those. I was working on projects initially where I didn't have kind of those guardrails. So if I broke something, it was like broken, which was like very high stakes. So now I'm a very big contender of put as many guardrails on your kind of workflow as possible, like work on package contributions or things that you can do where you can totally fail and it's not going to feel high stakes to you, because those are just, yeah, really good environments to learn in.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think, like on that topic, like what do you think the most important skill that you developed like through this process was that like helped you advance and get into sort of this new role at DBT Labs?
Yeah, I think I can speak both like non-technical and technical. I think the non-technical skill that was really important was just like building up confidence and being able to communicate your opinions about things or solutions to problems with feeling like it was a good suggestion and one that you had thought through, and getting to fail a lot and also getting exposure to lots of different things. I feel like I was able to come into working here at DBT with just a better sense of, I know what I'm talking about, which I did not when I got started. So I think that was a really important factor. And then thinking technically, there's some weird things that came up and ended up being really relevant. The package that we ended up building this past year, which is what I'm speaking at Coalesce about, which is like, if someone described it to me the other day as like a DBT linter, like a way to check a DBT project for our best practices. And some of the like core modeling for that, just SQL wise, came from learning how to model a specific type of data on previous projects, which just ended up being like a thing that I was able to bring to the project and say, oh, actually, I know how to model this hierarchical data and recursive CTEs and things that felt very random when I was originally learning them, but ended up being really relevant later on and when I was working on that package and that tooling. So I think as far as technical experience, There's some really specific random like SQL knowledge that ended up being really helpful. I also think the ability to understand what works in different warehouses was also really relevant, especially when working on that package, because we wanted it to be something that was going to be accessible to anyone, regardless of what warehouse they were using, whether they were on core or cloud using DBT, and having that kind of general knowledge of, okay, this works here, this works in Snowflake, but maybe it doesn't work in Redshift, and what are the kind of workarounds there?
I just posted the link to the package in the chat, but I don't think it's sent to everybody. Jake, maybe you have to send it to everyone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm the VIP.
Yeah.
I can do that.
I don't think I have the option to chat to everyone. Or maybe people did get it. But anyway, I posted the link to the package, the DBT project evaluator, which is super cool. I'm excited to hear more in your talk at Coalesce about it. And Jake posted the link to that. But yeah, there's so many things to learn. And yeah, depending where you are in your career, like what industry you're in, what company you're at, like so many different things can be helpful, whether it's like data modeling or like more of the DevX side of things with like CI/CD, and those guardrails you were talking about are super important. Like to your point around confidence and like feeling like you can come with those opinions and stand by what you're talking about, super important too, especially if you're starting out on a smaller data team and you need to come up with those like opinions and standards for the team. Was that something you were able to do at sort of those companies you were going in, like telling them these are the best practices, these are like the things that you should follow to have a successful DBT project, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think specifically with my work at DBT, that's been a huge part of my job that I've really enjoyed, is helping companies who are early enough that they haven't made the mistakes that I would make, that we can build a really strong foundation for them to grow as a team. Because I think that there are so many, as you scale, both like your team scales and your data scales, you start getting introduced to a whole host of other problems and kind of things to be considering. When you're thinking about your team growing, you're suddenly thinking about your Git branching strategy and making sure that's something that is going to be able to scale as you have 5 developers and as you have 50, and thinking about data problems as well. Thinking about as your data grows, you're going to have to start thinking more about performance, and optimizing your SQL queries or optimizing your DBT jobs. And I feel like there's so much best practice knowledge that is out there in the DBT community that if you can like instill in someone in their early days, they're going to be so much more successful long term. And I feel like that's been such a powerful element of my job, is seeing clients, even like I had one client that I worked with a little bit in February and then again in May, and just seeing the way that they had grown based off of kind of what we had worked on and developed together in the earlier part of the year, even in that small amount of time, was still really impactful. I think that's one of the coolest parts of like best practice teaching, is you can really do a lot of change if you get in there early enough, because you don't have to undo everything that you did wrong, which I've also been a part of that kind of thing, and that's maybe less fun.
Yeah, I've definitely had to do some of that on our team. Even like when we started with DBT in 2019, there was less so as many like best practice guides or stuff out there at the time. Now learning what we've learned, like if we started from scratch with the best practices, it would be really nice. But we've done some refactoring over the years. All right. There's some questions in the chat. Let me see what we got in here. Yeah, some people are asking just any recommendations on learning more about the modern data stack, learning more about building well thought out data model. Those are the first 2 that I see.
Yeah, I think for the data stack, it's like ever growing, right? Like you can never know everything. There's always new tools, there's always new insights, and there's so much content out there. And I feel like sometimes that can feel really intimidating to be like, okay, I see this like new article in this whatever data blog or something, and I'm reading it and I understand like maybe a fourth of it, right? Because it's talking about things that I don't know. I once had someone describe, I think this is a common thing, but like drinking from the fire hose when you like get started. I think that's true of anything, whether it's data engineering or you're learning a new language or whatever, but there's so much content, it can feel really overwhelming. And I think that the more kind of exposure that you have, the more you are going to eventually learn. So I try to I feel like I have so many tabs open because I'm constantly like opening an article and then I'm like, I'll read that if I have an extra 15 minutes in the workday. But even if I don't understand something, because there's still so much that I don't know, it can just be helpful to understand what's out there and what people are talking about, people are thinking about. So whether that there's analytics engineering roundup that DBT Labs puts out, that's a collection of different articles. Don't read all of them, but I try to read a lot of them because it's just, this is what people are talking about in the data world right now, whether that's going to conference or like watching old conference talks. I'll do that sometimes if there is a topic where I'm not super familiar with, like data mesh is like a huge thing right now. What can I learn about that? What videos can I fall into a Google rabbit hole trying to learn about? And I think just encouraging yourself to do independent research is something that's really important in data. And for me, it's just because it feels like it's constantly expanding the things that you need to know. DBT, we're going to have Python models really soon. And that's exciting, but also what does that mean for what are people going to do? How are people thinking about this? So yeah, just staying active in the various communication platforms that are out there, reading articles, read open pull requests or like conversation of people on open source tooling can be really helpful. Attending like whether it's conferences or talks. I know there was a Snowflake webinar on like Snowpark the other day, that's going to be part of how Python works in DBT. So that's like of interest to me. I would say independent research I don't know if this is true for you, Emily, but certainly for me, it feels like part of my job is to like research random new topics that are of interest to me.
Yes, 100%. Like you said, there's so much out there, and every week it seems like there's a new thing that's like people are talking about that is the most important thing in the world. And yeah, it's hard to keep up with it all, even just like reading those articles, reading the roundup articles, the summaries of what's going on. It's nice to keep a pulse of what's happening, even if it maybe isn't like totally relevant. Like maybe it isn't something that will ever happen at your company, but I don't know, maybe someday we'll like that little piece of knowledge will come in handy. But yeah, I think independent research is super important, especially when you're just starting out and like trying to get a feel for everything that's out there. Let's see, we had another question here. What resources or guidelines or best practices would you advise someone like me with experience in data science transitioning to analytics engineering and getting my first job?
Yeah, I think so. I was reading this comment and then shifting to like analytics engineering and being familiar with data engineering as well. I think this course seems like a great place to start. I think getting familiarity with the kind of big 4, big 5 warehouses is important. Understanding, maybe looking through like examples of how people have modeled data. There's a lot of great like open source guides or like even entire DBT projects. Like I'm pretty sure GitHub or GitLab's entire DBT project is like open source. So that could be a good place to look through. Okay, this is how this company builds out these models. Doing practice, like getting a trial DBT project and thinking up of some fake data and starting to model it. There's already like fake data in Snowflake that you can use to think about how would I model this, or what's more optimal from a query perspective. Is it better to write the query this way or this way? Thinking specifically for Snowflake, I think there's a good training course out there where you get a sandbox environment to play in. I would say, and this is me personally, I do learn from like reading and videos and like listening to podcasts, but I think things don't really get solidified for me until I get hands-on practice. So I would encourage you to, if there's any tool you're interested in learning more about, Finding whether it's like a training program or a training course where you can actually get access to that tool in some kind of sandbox environment to play around in. I'm constantly trying to do that. I'm like, oh, I want to learn this new BI tool. I'm like, can someone get me access to like our sandbox account internally so that I can like play around with it, see how it works? Or like courses where you do get access to try out things would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I think learning in like as close of the context of like how you'll be using it in like your job or like the real world is super helpful. That's what we're trying to do with this class, is make it as close to how you'd be using DBT in Snowflake and whatnot, like on the job. That's how I learned DBT, was like my boss was like, hey, DBT looks cool. And I was like, okay, I'll see it. I'll see what it is and if it will work for us. And that was really the best way to learn it, was just like, I'm going to try to build a DBT model, like using some of our data. So yeah, I think stuff like that's really helpful.
Grace, in this course, as much as possible, we try to even introduce some of the messiness of the questions. I play sort of the chief product officer of our startup, and I ask like questions. Sometimes they're vague and maybe misinterpreted, which is something that I'm sure you're familiar with. And we have snapshots, so you can see, update some of the data, so you can see how like new orders come in, which is something new we're doing. And then just also the realism of people have different ways to answer the same question or model the same data. So we do code reviews. So people are building different intermediate models and back models, and you can see, oh, that was pretty clever how this person did it. And you can revise your project or not, but it's try to do mirror kind of code review type format.
And that's awesome. Yeah, I think I saw a question in the chat of preparing yourself to like get that associate analytics engineering role. And I do think it is like practice of writing those SQL queries and getting feedback in the way that you're talking about. So it's really cool that you guys do that. I know that's part of why it's helpful to like, one thing you do practice is contribute to a package, because someone's going to have to review that. Like, it's not just going to go into the ethers, right? You're going to get someone saying, okay, I think you wrote that really well, or maybe this could be written in a better way. It's cool that you guys have code reviews. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's something that we have. Niall, who has written some DBT packages, come in to do a fireside chat for the past couple runs, and he does a lecture on packages. And that's one of the things he talks about, is just start with an open issue that seems like something that'd be good to practice with. Or maybe if there's something that you're doing at your company that could be more generalized, like maybe try making that like into a DBT package. There's so many things with how DBT is open source, which is awesome. Like you can get practice contributing and like doing all of those things and helping out the rest of the community, which is awesome. Which maybe that can be our segue, is what's your favorite part of the DBT community? What sort of like made you the most excited to join? Even I guess now you're on the DBT Labs team, so you're like running the community.
I know, I'm like in it. Yeah, that's such a good question. I've been trying to describe this to my friends or people that work in like other industries, and I don't know how to put a marker on what makes the DBT community so special, because part of me feels it being open source is like a huge piece of it. The fact that people can like contribute their ideas, see what's going on like under the hood, even before you like work here, that's just so cool to me. And also there's this sense of bringing people in and having like conversations that can actually like shape the product. I don't know if you guys are in the DBT community Slack, but I was a part of that before I joined DBT. And just, I remember once asking my manager, like, oh, like, I'm not sure like how to do this thing. And he was like, why don't you just ask in the Slack? And I was like, oh, sure, I'll ask all these strangers. And then people respond. And it's just this like place where I think people like want to help each other out. They want to see this product move in ways that will be beneficial to them, will be beneficial to others, and are willing to like share their ideas for ways that they're doing cool things. I always describe packages as being able to just steal someone else's brilliant idea and use it for yourself. And I love that's available in the community. I also think because it's like a tool for engineers, it's specifically like it's a tool for us. We want it to work really well. We want it to be really good. It's not, oh, this is a tool for like everyone is like a tool for this specific job. And I think the thing that also drew me in was like, there is such a sense of like joy and willingness to like not take yourself too seriously, even though this is in engineering and it's in the tech in just like world. I remember Coalesce last year started with like our head of, I don't even know what her technical role is, but the person running Coalesce like in a big purple wig, and Winnie, who is an amazing member, ex-member of the professional services team, now she works on the community team, did this amazing talk on like storytelling and data dressed as like an elf. And I literally showed that talk to my mom because I was like, my job, I had like just joined, right? I was like, this is the coolest place ever. Like people, especially coming from a theater background and from someone who really wanted to feel like I could be really creative. I think the DBT community also feels that way. There's so many people that have creative ideas, want to talk about things in like fun, interesting ways. Even like looking at the like Coalesce talks that are on plan, like I saw that someone's doing something on like data and musicals. There's like all these interesting ways that people think about data and bring in their own personal passions to it that, yeah, I don't know, it's just like amazing to me.
Yeah, I know. Coalesce is like when you watch it for the first time and see all that stuff, you're like, what? Like, where am I? But it's awesome. Yeah, I loved that talk from Winnie last year, and Jillian dressing up was awesome. I'm sure there'll be even more of that this year, especially it being in person. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like, but I think I learn every year. I learn so much from everyone who gives talks during the course. We'll be running the course through that week, so like we'll definitely be sharing like talks for people to go watch, make sure people have time to go listen in on some stuff. But yeah, it's awesome to learn from so many people in the community who are doing really cool things. We have till 12, Jake.
Yeah, we have total.
Cool. We have a couple questions in the Q&A box that I want to make sure we get to. I think we answered this one on like best practices already. There's this question on, I guess, like more like tactical question on like how you think about dealing with bad or messy data, which we actually will more talk about in next week when we get to tests. But if Grace, if you want to give your answer, that would
I
be.
love this example that they've given of writing Hogwarts. Instead of writing Hogwarts, they wrote hogwash. I love that. But yeah, I think for messy data it's like the number one probably piece of frustration in the data world, right? No data is perfectly clean. And yeah, as Emily alluded to, like an awesome thing about DBT is you test to prevent that getting all the way to the dashboard and now it's 1 week old and you finally found it from really happening, like being alerted right when someone puts hogwash in instead of Hogwarts. I think another nice thing about DBT is you can think about centralizing your data cleanup. So rather than talking about you find this mistake and it's spread everywhere, rather than having to, oh no, now I have to think about every single script where I've ever worked with this school name field and I have to go in and clean it up everywhere and make sure I don't miss any spots. You can think about creating just like a single kind of like layer of modeling in DBT where you're cleaning everything up, and then as long as you're using those models downstream, you don't have to worry about it again. I think that's one of the like magical pieces of DBT is just thinking about ways that you can prevent like duplication of code or duplication of even processes so that you take care of everything once and then don't have to think about it again. So yeah, that would be what I would say there.
Yeah, definitely. We're starting with our staging models this week, and then next week we're going to start to build on to that. And we also have a great guest coming next week to talk more about like data modeling and the different layers and exactly what you're just saying. If you are intentional about like setting up your models in this way, like, yeah, you only have to make a fix in one spot and then you're good, which is awesome. Don't have to worry about finding every single place where it is if you just have that one layer, which is what I really love about the like DBT best practices on the model layers. I think who gave that talk? It was like 2 years ago. Someone from DBT gave a talk on like auditing model layers.
I think that was Christine.
Yes, Christine.
Yes.
I think I watched that talk like 4 times because it was so great. And there was like so many awesome like tips and like pieces of advice in there. And now there's like the whole guide on it, which I think I shared in the chat. But yes, definitely agree with everything you said. Let's see if we can get like 1 or 2 more questions. Do you think data scientists and ML engineers should learn DBT? I can give a quick answer first. I think depends on the team you're on, I guess, the company you're at. Like at Drizly, for example, our data scientists do use DBT. So like it's really helpful for them to learn it. But I'm sure you've seen a lot of different org situations in your consulting career.
Yeah, I do think it's the classic it depends answer, but I think there's definitely a future world that I'm imagining where ML engineers, data scientists are working more with DBT. I've seen DBT projects where an output of DBT goes to the ML engineers and they're doing some machine learning, and then they're outputting something that then goes back into DBT. And I think there's a lot of thoughts right now of how we can think about data flow as not just, here's all the sources going into DBT, we're doing all our transformations, all right, we're outputting, we're done. There's a lot more, I think, now of out and back in, that I think there's like an open conversation somewhere on GitHub about this. That's just thinking about how can we conceptualize like that kind of flow. So for that reason, I do think there's relevance to learning DBT, even if you're not working with it every single day, just being able to understand how it works. And ultimately, if you're getting your outputs from DBT, like knowing your upstream systems, even at a basic level, will help you understand why issues are popping up, how request fixes for that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like we had a follow-up question coming in around like the model layer. Would you recreate those tables that got the corrupted value? So really what happens is like in the staging layer, that's like the first layer from your source. So that's really like where you'd put the fixes in, or like the cleanups, if that makes sense. And then anything that's using that downstream, whether that's an intermediate model or like a dimmer fact model, like it would flow into those downstream places, if that makes sense. Hopefully. So we have a couple minutes left. Maybe we can end with just some general advice that you have for like people getting started in analytics engineering or just in DBT for the class.
Yeah. I think my biggest advice is, maybe I have multiple pieces of advice, but I would say one thing would be to, it's a lot to learn. It's like a whole world, and it's okay to feel like overwhelmed by that. I feel like a lot of people that I talk to who are like just getting started in analytics engineering are just like, oh my gosh, there's so much to learn, and like, how will I ever learn this all, and can feel a little bit intimidated by that. And I would just encourage people to take it one step at a time. You'll learn things as you get more exposure to different types of problems. Like, it's going to come naturally as you like, oh, suddenly setting grants on models is really relevant, so I'm going to now learn about it. You don't have to learn everything right away. So like taking your time with it so that you make sure that you're, adjusting the things that you're learning without overwhelming your system. Because I think that was big for me, is I felt like when I first got started, I was like, I have to learn everything. I have to know what every term means. And it's, you don't, like, you can, when you're starting off, it's okay to be like, hey, I've got absolutely no idea what you're talking about right now, and I'm going to spend some time after this call quickly like researching this and asking you questions to follow up so that I make sure that I have a better understanding. So yeah, I would just say, don't be intimidated by it. It is so lovely. I think when it all clicks, it's just like such a magical experience. At least it was for me. And I hope that you guys all have that feeling as you continue on in this course. Because I really think like once you get the basics, you'll have reasons and experiences that are going to lead you to learn everything else. So that would be my biggest advice. I hope you guys stay with it. It's like such a fun world, such a fun community. It makes my brain like so happy to do this kind of work, because I think there is this engineering mindset that comes along with creativity that is hard to find elsewhere, or at least was hard to find for me. So hope you guys have that experience too. Sounds like you guys are set up for success with this course though.
Awesome. That's great advice.
Yeah, it's awesome advice.
Definitely. Thanks so much for joining us. That was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank
And I'll
you.
see you at Coalesce. And if you're
Yeah.
coming online, check out my talk at once it's been recorded and sent out. And yeah, good to see everyone.
Yeah, we'll share all the Coalesce stuff and definitely see you there.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
All right.
guys.